So, Phil, thank you for sitting back down with me on the show. How's it going, dude?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. What strain you sparking up? I'm sure you're about to spark up a delicious strain.
I was about to. This is some white truffles.
And I always love to ask you this question. That weed you're smoking on, is it from Illinois?
No, it's from Michigan.
Dude, at this point, I was hoping you to answer it that way. At this point, if somebody wanted to, they could go back and listen to the episodes that we've made, and I think they could make a compilation of that exact interaction because it always goes like that. Phil, what are you smoking on? You say the strain, I say, and is that from Illinois? And you go, no.
It's funny because lately I do look at like menus of some dispensaries around me just being like, if some of these craft brands or things were, I mean, in my mind, 25 bucks, 30 bucks, like I'd be tempted just to go try one,
Sure.
something grown in Illinois. But it's like the price is never that low. So I never end up going. Like it's just like, man, I just can't, like 45, $50 for an eighth out the door. Like I just can't enjoy that. Not even just to like sample something for curiosity.
Right. Right. Because you realize that if you pay 50 more dollars, you get seven more eighths of cannabis in Michigan. And by that I mean an ounce goes for about $100, you know.
Well, right. And even like, I'd even pay like like this stuff was 150 for an ounce. Like, there's like a range I'd be willing to pay, but any like $150 ounce you find here is going to be, from like a GTI or a Cresco.
Right.
It's like I just not interested.
Yeah, no, you're precisely right. So, in this episode of the Cole Memo, we'll be recapping a really exciting event that we recently went to. We're the type of people that show up at local board meetings. That's how cool we are, right, Phil?
Yeah, we like to spend Monday nights about 2 hours just listening to a bunch of old people complain about a dispensary.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's
Some actually
that's
weren't some actually weren't that old though, which was a little shocking.
yeah, there were some that I feel like were like my age, our age, kind of in
There were
that.
definitely some people there that were my age or younger.
Yeah.
Like there was one mom, I think, who I was like, man, you look like you're probably like 30. Why do you have such a problem with the dispensary?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, so we'll be closing out with that, but folks, I wanted to lead up the show with scathing allegate. The Cole memo is under fire by a couple of anonymous redditors. I want to talk about that at the very top of the show, but before I do that, I just want to remind everybody that's tuning in that this is the Cole memo. I'm your host, Cole Preston. You can find every episode in audio, video, and transcript format. To do that, just look at the episode description that you're listening to now. Within that description, you should be able to find a link that will take you to our website, which will display the transcript for this episode and the platforms where you can find this episode in audio or video formats. And if you're unable to find that link, simply take note of the episode number and visit thecolememo.com. From there, in the top right hand corner, you can use our search functionality to find the corresponding episode. And then you'll be able to access that audio, video, or transcript version of that episode, whichever you prefer. You might also find any links that we reference during the episode so that you can do your own research. If you're not listening to this episode of the Cole Memo on Patreon, you're listening to it a bit later than our patrons. To become a patron, go to thecolememo.com/Patreon. It only costs $3 a month, gets you instant access to our episodes as they release, and it's a great way to support our show. A brief thank you to our patrons. Another way to support our show is at thecolememo.com/support. And one of the best ways to support our show is free. Subscribe to or follow the show, leave a positive review from wherever you're listening to us from. Favorite this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, or post a review. Your engagement and support is appreciated. Today is June 28th, 2024. It's Friday. And like I said, I'd like to start off the show with a recent, we'll call it an allegation against the Cole memo, an allegation that I upvoted because I'm all actually for transparency and information. So recently on a subreddit called Illinois Trees, which my Zoom is messing up right now, somebody posted about a lawsuit that is active, and I can give you the details to look up this lawsuit here in just a moment. they posted some results, or rather some images of this lawsuit. And in this last image that I'm displaying on my screen right now, the person, the original poster said, is there any reason you haven't taken this news? This hasn't been in the news, or you haven't taken this to the public yet. And the person who they blacked out their username said, all the papers, journalists, state agencies, and politicians are well aware of this situation and the fraud that has occurred and continue to occur. The press, after reaching out for comment from New Era, have made it go away. Upon requesting evidence on public record, they have made it clear that this will never see the light of day and they'll NDA us. An interview was even done with the Cole Memo, and he made it clear he was friends with New Era, so he never did anything with it as well. So feel free. Everything here is public record. So there's actually two separate allegations in this thread. We're going to start with this one. So I spoke to the plaintiffs in this lawsuit. It's very clear to me based off of whoever this is right here that they're involved in some way in the lawsuit. Otherwise, they wouldn't know that I did, yes, in fact, interview one of the plaintiffs from this show. Now, here's the part that I dispute. This is completely false, and I'm surprised they would go so far as to say something completely false when they know that our entire conversation was on the record. I recorded it before they even got into the phone call because I did not want one word off of the record. I never said that I was friends with New Era. I said, I'm sure your legal defense knows I have had New Era on the show several times. I also just want to say that I've never said to the plaintiffs or anybody that I wouldn't release this interview. Frankly, if I could just say, as I've said several times in the past, I don't consider myself to be a journalist. I'm definitely not a court reporter. And for all those reasons, just to be candid into why haven't talked about this yet, I felt a little bit uncomfortable commenting on ongoing litigation. I didn't want to find myself in court. At this
Well,
point,
also,
go ahead.
weren't you not able to like find the lawsuit?
Yeah, for a long time, I was not
So it's
able
like
to find
there
it.
wasn't like a way to corroborate
Right,
it.
right. So that was the other thing. They did send me a draft. The thing about the draft that I noticed, because I shared it with you, Phil, there were several typos in the draft, and I was like, "Well, this doesn't seem right." So I wanted to see something official. Now, ultimately, I was able to find something official, and like I said, I'm gonna share the court case number with you all today, so that you can look it
Well,
up and
and
um,
just like, yeah, like people are weird and do weird things to other people. So it's like you couldn't put it out there without corroborating the story because like it could just be someone looking to like make you put something out there that's totally false to
and
like
I'd like
make you look bad.
bingo. And
So
to that end, it's interesting. All the papers, journalists, state agencies, and politicians that they went to are not named, but little old me, I'm named in this. I'm curious what other journalists they went to. Why was I'm not a journalist. That's the funny thing, right? The people that like a Chicago Tribune, a Chicago Sun-Times, if like that's a story there. If this is big
I
and is
just
right.
well, and just that first part of that statement, all the papers, journalists, state agencies, and politicians are well aware of the situation. I doubt that's the case.
Yeah,
All of these people know what this is.
right.
Like
So
I just doubt that.
yeah. So I'll just say this, kind of I don't know that I have much more to add to this other than um I still have no hesitation other than the fact that this is ongoing litigation. I'm happy to release this interview because frankly, if you look up the lawsuit and Google the names involved in the lawsuit, you'll find that one of the individuals were named in one of the original lawsuits that tied up the entire cannabis licensing lottery, shut the whole thing down. So, you know, with that said, it's almost like I really did want to break this story. But again, I want to take a step back and saying when I read the lawsuit as it was originally sent to me and then when I found it, I didn't know what I was reading. I'm not a court reporter. And like, so for those reasons, I just I wanted to kind of see how it played out. I was a little bit suspect because as this person's asking, this windfall to Canna, is there any reason this hasn't been taken to the news or the public yet? And I asked that same question. And I just couldn't help but feel that it just felt weird to come to me knowing that again, I am not, a studied journalist or anything else. So um I just didn't really feel like at this point I was the person to break this story. Being not studied in these things, like I don't know what the ramifications are for commenting on ongoing litigation, right? So it's really a lot less mysterious, I think, than the way that this person puts it. And I just got to say, as like a parting comment, and just to reiterate something I said earlier, it is crazy to me that they would try to bend the truth in what happened when they know the whole thing was recorded, you know. So
Well, and like you let me listen to that episode, that interview, and like
yeah.
the person sounded like credible and everything, but I feel like because we talked about it and it was like, I don't know, it just felt like if you were to put that out there, you would be like you would be like getting involved in a dispute on one side almost
Mhm.
versus like covering the
Right.
dispute more generally, you know?
Right. And that's the thing. It's like again to the point of I haven't yet said I'm not going to release it. I'd like to see what ends up happening with this. And then when it's maybe not ongoing litigation or whatever else, I have their side of the story captured, right? I can kind of produce a retroactive what occurred, you know what I mean? And kind of cover it after all is said and done. But like you say, while it's going on, I felt like I would be kind of throwing my name in the middle of something that's way bigger than me, you know?
Hmm.
So this is I'm displaying right now the Redditor that kind of I would say piggybacked off of what was in this post. And this will lead us to our second allegation, which I think is honestly hilarious, Phil. I think it's going to be a good laugh we have here. They say what's crazy is how the GTI fiasco and now this two instances where the Cole memo has been accused of operating in a less than ethical way. He portrays himself as a warrior of the people, but apparently he has to eat like everyone else. Dollar sign, dollar sign, dollar sign, winky face. Disappointing to see, but not surprising. And so let's well, before we
What
transition to
about GT?
GTI, yeah, we'll talk about GTI, but any other thoughts on this, Phil, before I do a hard transition away from the New Era lawsuit?
Nope.
Cool. Yeah, I guess
Well,
just to
I would just say the person like with the story about the lawsuit and New Era and stuff, like it seemed like they just wanted to like get the story out there,
right.
but I was unclear on what the purpose of that was, like if there was an ongoing lawsuit.
Thank you. And that's actually kind
That was
of
kind of
that's where
like I was like, are they just like looking for like some kind of money from New Era and they're like trying to get this out there to like drum up some drama in the cannabis scene? I don't know. It just seemed like what was the motive if there is a lawsuit going on?
right. And that was
And like
something
if you're involved in a lawsuit, aren't you kind of not supposed to talk about it?
there you go, Phil. That's what I was trying to say earlier. I was having a hard time of putting it into words, but it felt weird to me that they were coming to my podcast when I've always been told, and again, not being anybody that's credentialed at all, but one thing I am aware of is that if there's ongoing lawsuit, people won't comment about it. You know why I know that, Phil? Outdoor cultivation. in Illinois. The state of Illinois will not comment to me on the record, but a high-ranking official has. And what they told me is, Cole, you don't comment on ongoing litigation, so that's why we're not answering you on the record.
Well, and I think that it might be different if you're like the plaintiff suing someone versus the
Fair.
defendant or like someone from the state who's on the other end of a lawsuit. Um, yeah, like it almost to me, like listening to the interview was like they wanted to get bad press out about New Era to like put pressure on them to like settle the lawsuit or something like that. I remember like just having that kind of feeling from the whole thing.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that you're absolutely right. There may be like a nuance to where like if you're the plaintiff as opposed to the defendant, maybe you aren't particularly opposed to it getting into the media, but that was you just hit your head on the nail on the head with one of my biggest points. The biggest things that caused me uncomfort was like to me, if you're in a court case, you're going to try to win that like with the judge and the jury, not through the listeners of the Cole memo. And you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? That's
Yeah, right.
it was a weird spot for me. So it sounds like you're not aware of the GTI
Yeah,
allegations
what and
against
what's
me.
the GTI fiasco?
So I think at first it was the fact that I was one of the first people to start sharing that there was a boycott from GTI. And if you recall, people were like, "What? Why is Illinois Trees starting this boycott?" And I took a opportunity to clarify that nobody at Illinois Trees started the boycott. People from Canna Equity Illinois started the boycott. So that was the first thing. Now, where this cold classroom person came into the picture, we at the mod team stickied a post from Sway Dispensary. So it was a dispensary talking about the GTI protest and how they were no longer going to carry GTI. They basically pointed out that, or they're alleging that we are funneling customers to Sway Dispensary, and that's the allegation right there. That this GTI thing is me and I guess others funneling people to Sway Dispensary, which I just have to say is particularly hilarious because I'm pretty sure Chicago Normal is upset with me right now. And I just want to say to Chicago Normal, if you're watching, no reason to be upset. Uh, just called it how I saw it. You signed as a proponent of the hemp ban. As a consumer, I have problems with that. And you all should know that I always approach these conversations in good faith. So just calling it how I see it. And frankly, like I said, I think that allegation is funny because I'm pretty sure they're upset with me about that because Phil, you saw the executive director posted a comment on my
Yeah,
Instagram.
she didn't like what I had to say about.
Yeah, so you had made a comment and I really liked it because you basically were talking about how you noticed that Chicago Normal was listed as a proponent for the hemp ban. And I liked that comment because you were talking about how basically it's afforded you more access to the cannabis plant than any other state-based cannabis program. That's
Well,
not
it's
a
the same. It's in some ways, it's like the same thing that GTI did, right? Like GTI was advocating to scuttle this bill so that medical patients would have the same, wouldn't get more options for, it would limit their access to the dispensaries that they already have access to. But it's like banning, like that hemp bill would have put the hemp market in Illinois out of business. So it's, you're also taking options and access away from people.
yeah, no,
Like it could have been a better hemp bill, and then I wouldn't have had a problem with them being proponents of it. But like, come on, like you already support limited licensing. Now you want to take hemp options away? Like, get out of here.
I didn't think about it the way you just put it, which is that it's all you could make an analogy between the point of access for med patients between supporting a hemp ban and repealing this idea of med patients at all dispensaries. That was a really good point. And if I could just to add to your point, we've had nurses on the show talk about how like a Jane and Mary's ice cream is really good for geriatric the patients. You know what I mean? Like,
That was whose account I was putting the comment on.
yeah, Exactly. And so anyways, if I could just make it a little bit more clear, like I'm showing the comments, I made this post about how you should get your medical card to cultivate cannabis and how it affords you more rights and can keep you out of trouble. And Ari from Chicago Normal said, I have so many things to say about this, but not about you. And I don't think our members will after being attacked. This is why you should ask before you trash. I have no idea I had no idea what she was talking about. She ended up saying, I'm referring to your like on Penny Hearts, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know who they are. Are they working? Where are they when shit gets real? Are they in meetings every day? No. When they get a clue, have a clue. Um, so I can't remember which post you commented on. I'd love to find your comment that she's referring to that I ended up liking. But I say that all to say that this idea that I'm working with Chicago Normal, first of all, on its face, given what has recently transpired, is not likely. But second of all, let's just back up and talk about like what I talk about on this show all the time and like one of my favorite things to say. If you're supporting cannabis dispensaries in their current form, that is to support the continued criminalization of cannabis. Does that sound like anything that anybody would say if they were trying to funnel people to dispensaries? Like I am just against dispensaries. You know what I mean? And we've always
Well,
said we are boycotting Illinois dispensaries by going to Michigan and growing our own. You know what I mean?
well, and I think too, like, yeah, the effort of boycotting GTI is to send people to any other option. So
True.
in a way, sure, go to Sway. I'd rather you go there than to Rise, or for that matter, any of the larger companies, the Sunnyside that's up the street from them, or, an Ascend or a Zenleaf.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, um, that's about the
Like
size
that.
of it.
I mean, to bring it to, the town hall we went to, it's like, that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to that. I mean, I wanted to be able to say something, but then it kind of seemed like you actually had to be a resident because they wanted to know your address or
Hmm.
like where you lived in the community. Um, but I'm right across the street essentially from Evergreen Park, which is where this dispensary was going to go in. And it was 1937 group looking to open it. I mean, in the Illinois market, like they're probably one of the few companies that I wouldn't have a problem buying a product from, even though they have ties to some of these larger operators, just because like, they say the right things. Like they're not against home grow. They don't believe in license caps. Like, Ambrose, the CEO, the first time I met him was at a protest outside of a Zenleaf and he was holding a home grow sign. So
Yeah.
like I wanted to go up to, it's like there are companies you can support in this market.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Because I mean, I said what I just said, but hell, just this last week, I was at Molly's joint smoking weed with Brad Spearson, so I'll still go to him. It's almost like you say, that you would have to be able to find, I don't know if you said this before we went on the podcast or not, but you'd almost have to like find a new craft grower to like make that complete experience wholesome. You know what I mean? Because too often it sucks. You go to like support one of these small dispensaries and then all they have are the big companies, right? So it's like, crap. I'm like supporting you, but I'm also supporting them. So,
Yeah, it's also like intermingled and
yeah,
taking part in any of it doesn't feel great,
right.
but it is what it is.
Yeah. So, oh, I mentioned that I would before we get on to the town hall meeting, let me really quick find this court information so that people can look it up themselves. Again, I have no problem sharing like matter of fact information, but definitely releasing an interview with a plaintiff in ongoing litigation, that is uncharted territory for this podcast. Um, so if you go to the Cook
Did
Count,
did
go ahead.
did you ask them at the time like why they were coming to you?
Yeah, I believe I did. I don't remember exactly how they responded, but I might be able to find it up because again, I got the whole conversation recorded and transcribed.
But say what were you going to say for the court like information though?
Yeah. So if folks want to look this up, what you'll need to do is go to the Cook County Law Division. It's very important. There are different divisions. Make sure you go to the Cook County Law Division case lookup. And what you're going to want to look up is 2023 2023 L as in Lima 008973. No space, no spaces. And you will find the court complaint that is being referred to. And what I would recommend, if you really wanted to find out some more information about this, first of all, they show you where the hearings are and when they are. Last I checked, there were 3 affidavits. Ask me what that means. I don't know, but you can check them. This is how you do it. And these are like the basics that I know, but yeah, to chart to wade into that territory, I'm just like, yeah, well, we'll let it settle, and then I'll release a good interview about that. I just want to say again, though, look at the names of the plaintiffs and Google them. Google them. You'll see that lawsuit that I was talking about, and I mean, look, seems to be a pretty big story here. I'm just not going to wade into either side of it just yet. I would rather let it play out in the court of law rather than getting sucked into the court of law to let it play out, to watch it play out, right?
Well, yeah, because I also wonder too, like if it's like an ongoing thing, like and you're releasing something about it, you clearly interviewed and talked to this guy. It's like, does that open you up to being like subpoenaed in this thing? Like,
These are questions that get asked on air that I go, should I even be talking about this now?
yeah.
No, so yeah, I mean, look, it's something that I wondered about, and that's why I've tried to just remain matter of fact, which is just I've not really talked about what they've said. I've just kind of confirmed that this conversation did occur, and I haven't released it or provided them with any materials yet. What's funny was I actually was going to provide them with a transcript and even allow them to watch it back, just in case, right? They wanted to review. Ultimately did not do that, and now don't plan on doing that because they've thrown me under the bus. It seems, like look, yeah, so yeah, that'll be interesting. I hope that that's not the case because really I'm just sharing like public record surface level information, you know what I mean? We haven't even gotten into the substance of the lawsuit itself, and I'd rather not because I don't understand it. That's the whole problem is like I read through it and I just don't get it. You know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
knowledgeable enough to tell you guys this is what it says. You know what I mean? And I think the only time I have been confident enough to do something like that, just to give a plug for a recent episode we did, was episode 97, Illinois Cannabis Per Se Limit, an impossible standard is interpreted. That was regarding closed litigation that I got testimony from. You know what I mean? So felt very comfortable after speaking, to a lawyer and everything else. That's why in that case I got into the substance of the case. But yeah, that's why I encourage you all, hey, public information, if you want to learn more about it and you actually know how to read those types of things and you know what an affidavit is and how to get it and blah, 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 take the information and run with it because it's, there it is. Um, yeah. So that's that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else before we move on. Yeah, the GTI one, I will just say, was a funny one. The whole idea that I know that not everybody listens to my podcast or follows me or knows everything that I believe, but like it takes just a little bit of time, like 10 minutes of looking at my Instagram or something like that to be like, okay,
Well, but also like GTI did what they did. They hired a bunch of lobbyists to derail that bill. Like, you're not like making that up.
right.
So Yeah, it's like Sway, just the owner being involved in in cannabis activism. Like, yes, they organized the boycott. Like, they actively were like, we're dropping these products. Here's a form, for other independent dispensaries so you can do the same. It's like they're just organizing a boycott.
Yeah. And I guess let's just
If I mean, like, if anything, I don't know, like, I'm sure there's people that like rhythm products that are going, so it's like, if anything, I would think I don't know, like, it could be good PR, but it could also slightly hurt your business because you're dropping a huge product line,
mhm.
like one of the biggest operators in the state. So it's just like, I'm sure there's better ways to get more business than getting involved in a boycott.
Right. Right. And look, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, because actually this is a thing that that person I feel has brought up that I actually agree with, that Cold Classroom Reddit account. And they were kind of talking about, see, this is like, I don't think you'll get this out of anybody that's actually like participating in the boycott. And by that, I don't mean I'm not participating in the boycott. I just have been, as a matter of fact, for like the last 4 years, because I try not to go to those dispensaries. But what you won't hear, I think, about a lot of from a lot of the people that are really behind this boycott and are pushing this boycott, they'll acknowledge the complications. I don't want to like be misleading about that. They'll acknowledge like, hey, if there's a social equity dispensary and they've got GTI, don't necessarily like, fuck them there. Do you get what I'm saying, Phil? Have you heard
Right,
the
right,
same
right.
thing?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to the topic I'm trying to acknowledge and kind of give to this anonymous redditor, it's a topic that you of all people know, Phil. I've definitely talked to you about. There are some inconsistencies in this protest. I'm with it, don't get me wrong. I'm always down to pile on GTI, but like, if you really want to talk about doing damage to patient access, all of these corporate cannabis companies uh, really could be blamed for this in one way or another, you know?
Yeah. Like,
So,
I mean, I've been boycotting CBAI since before they were CBAI.
yeah, when they were
The
when they were
Medical Cannabis
MCAI.
Alliance of
Yeah,
Illinois. Yeah.
yeah. And then when they were the Illinois Relief Fund. Right.
Before that.
Yeah. So I want to give a plug for colememo.com/history because again, um, I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back. I really wish people would take this and run with it because it's the whole point of the fucking series. Our series on colememo.com/history is where we lay out all of these things and how, yeah, it's not just GTI, right? And I want to be clear, I'm not critiquing the boycott. I'm with it. That's why I share the dank memes that I do. It's all good and well, right? But I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a very salient point that I believe this person brought up, which is this that, yeah, they kind of said the same thing. All these corporations should really be blamed for, you know,
Right.
the
But you
lack of
can't,
access.
the the cannabis activists in Illinois are like, a lot of them are involved in the regulated
Right.
market or trying to get into it. So it's like, what, 95% of the product still comes from
Right.
the original
Right.
producers. So
You just
like,
can't do
if you
it.
want to play in the game at all, like, you can't, it would be nice if we had had some caregiver system with 20, 30,000 members where, that would be the foundation of your cannabis activism. But,
Right. And that's the ideal situation. Let's just remind folks that Carol Ammons would have given that would have not allowed these operators to participate in this adult use market. So that whole thing that you just laid out, while it's very true now, look, if they want this limited license market and stuff, what's funny is they could have still had that without giving first mover advantage. Obviously, that's all woulda, coulda, shoulda talk. But I'm just saying, like, then this thing that I'm talking about right now would be possible because the adult use market would only be social equity, right? Um,
right.
so anyways, obviously that's all in the past, but it's Good little history to bring up.
I mean, it's in the past, but we still live under the CRTA. It's still the present too.
True. True. Yeah. I just I don't see anybody. It seems like one thing we won't do um is call out the fact that it is the CRTA and that we didn't truly legalize it. Again, Phil, I know I think I've brought it up the last few times you've been on the podcast. I've seriously been told, like, stop saying that we didn't legalize it fully. Stop saying that we failed it. I'm not gonna stop saying it. I'm
Yeah,
not like I
because they did fail.
right.
It was garbage legislation, and then
Yeah, so I'm not gonna be like
the idea that legislators' egos are so fragile, you can't talk about how shitty of a job they did, so they would actually do something better.
right,
Like, get the
right.
fuck out of here.
Exactly. Exactly. So all right. Well, so it was Evergreen Park that we went to, right?
That's where it was.
And this is a good transition because we were just kind of talking about limited licenses, and I think a good way to start this topic before we get into all the crazy stuff we heard and saw is that it seems like, okay, so we've got this limited license market, and these people that hold these limited licenses are having a tough time opening up these stores. I mean, it seems like local government is almost like this other check and balance that people weren't aware of. I'm kind of being joking, facetious when I say that, but go ahead.
Like, I've talked about this with you before. Like, the state having the license capped is just like redundant, because if you didn't have that license cap in the legislation, there would just be some de facto license cap based on the number of municipalities in Illinois. A number of them won't want any dispensaries. You're not going to have a town that wants to open 50 dispensaries. I just don't think it's going to happen in this state. So it's like all this worry and wanting them to be spaced out. It's like, what we learned in this town hall, that there's actually a cap on the number of vape stores in the town.
Right.
So it's like, they'll cap businesses if there's too many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just the state caps, just, I don't know, they just seem so pointless and redundant. And the whole like, yeah, like anyone could, like, you could have gotten your license from the state if you had made it so anyone could get a license, and it's really easy and it's all open, like
Yeah.
more like a Michigan. Some of those people still would like be denied opening where they want to, like some of them might not be able to get it up and running, like, even though they have the, so just, it's just so maddening.
Yeah. Well, just to your point, again, to your point, you just said like a vape shop's it's one of the easier businesses to open up. You get a tobacco retailer's permit, you get your local zoning. But yeah, you just said it. Like this town, what is it, a town? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to just make sure.
I think it's a village. I don't really know the distinction and what that means,
Me either. Let's call it a village though. That sounds nice.
it's like a community just outside of Chicago.
Yeah,
So it's like practically it's almost like a neighborhood of Chicago. It just never joined the city when all the other communities around it were joining.
gotcha. But as you pointed out, they had a cap for vape stores, and it's something that when we heard it, we both looked at each other and was like, "There are business cap, there are
Yeah, I
caps
was
for
like,
other
that's a
businesses."
thing.
Yeah. So it's to your point, this whole rationale for limiting licenses is the idea that if we issue too many licenses, that prices would get so low and, people wouldn't be able to make money. But it's like here people are trying to make money with a limited license. And they listed off, I have to say, Phil, it's got to be more than five. I want to say eight for some reason. I really should have double checked, but somebody asked, how many towns have you gone to trying to open this dispensary? We're Evergreen Park here, but how many other places have you gone to try this? And I swear they listed off more than five places.
I don't know if those were like failed attempts to get one shop open, though. I think some of those were just like other places they have looked or are in the
Okay,
process of opening, or
gotcha.
yeah.
That makes more sense because I like when she was going through that list, just kind of candidly, I was like, damn, this doesn't seem very convincing if you're just talking about all the places you've been denied, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it was that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So anyways, I thought that was a a good place to start. Any other ideas on that topic? Because I really think that that was one of the biggest takeaways I had from that meeting, aside from the fact that, there are still some crazy reefer madness people, is that, hey, we seem to have some checks and balances on the overabundance of any business already.
Well, and like how there's all the security measures and stuff in the CRTA that's like imposed on everyone. Like if the local town was that concerned, like, they were like, are you going to have an armed guard? Are you not going to have an armed guard? Like, talking about different security measures they want them to have.
Hmm.
So it's like, even if there weren't any in the legislation, you would think even something like that type of regulation would be decided or could be established at the local level.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was like I said,
There were
just
a lot of crazy reefer madness people, though.
yeah, there were, and it got heated right off the top, I must say. They
Well,
started. Go ahead.
I just want to say part of the reason I wanted us to talk about this is like cannabis people who hear this, like if there is a dispensary opening near you, even if you don't use dispensaries, you might not like that company, show up to say good things about weed to counter the idiots that are going to come out because there's going to be a bunch of them. I just feel like this isn't the first community that I've read about opposition to dispensaries.
Hmm.
Like I remember there was someone trying to open one. I don't know what the status of it is, but in Garfield Park, in like a actual black neighborhood in the city, and a bunch of people showed up being like, "We don't want this in our community." So it's just like, it's like there's a lack of dispensaries in black communities in the city, but then they go to open one in a local community, and you have a bunch of. But I'm sure there would have been a ton of people in the community that are for it. They just didn't show up to that meeting.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you just think about, I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but just stereotypically, the people that will show up to village board meetings are older people. And stereotypically, older people, I- I'll back off this comment a little bit because I have heard stats that say old, elderly are some of the grow it like there's a growing subsect of elderly people that are trying cannabis. But I'm just saying, out of anybody that's going to be anti-cannabis, stereotypically, it's older people that grew up in the reefer madness era. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm trying to say. So, so yeah, to your
Yeah, yeah,
point,
totally.
folks show up to these things, and I thought it was funny because the reason I ended up showing up to it was you told me about it, and you're like, last time I read about this, I got the impression that there were some crazy comments made, and boy, Phil, your intel did not disappoint. Did not
Yeah.
disappoint. So I want to just start off from the top, what I remember, and then I've actually taken notes of some of the comments that were said later on. But I just to like paint the picture, like it got tense right off the bat. I remember the mayor made a comment. 1937 group was preparing their presentation, and the mayor said, hey, if we could keep side chatter to a minimum and give the people the respect of their presentation, you'll all have time at the end to ask questions or make statements. So if we could keep the chat in the peanut gallery at a minimum, um, that'd be great. And that is when one of the people sitting very near us said something to the effect of, "I will, not this is we are not a peanut gallery," and blah blah blah. And it was funny because you leaned over to me and whispered and said, "I'm pretty sure that's the exact definition of a peanut gallery."
Yeah.
People like yelling back and forth.
Yeah, that was
So,
funny.
um, I skipped over a
That
cool.
that that woman did seem a little unhinged.
Yeah, yeah, she did, and that woman is one of the women I took some notes on what she said.
Well, it was funny because specifically she was claiming that the dispensary coming to, because I guess she lives in back of it or near where the location would be. It was close enough to her house that her kids were not going to let her grandkids come visit her anymore. And I was kind of like, is that just like an excuse not to have to see you?
Right.
Because like you don't necessarily seem like the most pleasant person.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I want to get back to hers because I actually took some pretty good notes on what she said. And like you said, she does mention her twins. Um,
That was, but one of the, because in the same community, there's like, along 95th Street, there's probably 20 places that serve alcohol, including like grocery stores, restaurants, a Binny's, a giant Binny's. It's always busy. I just, I just thought this idea that a dispensary, like people seemed really bothered by the idea of kids potentially walking on a sidewalk and walking past someone who had just come out of the dispensary.
yeah.
What, how are we going to deal with that? It's like, well, how do you deal with kids walking down the sidewalk and someone's coming out of Binny's?
Hmm.
just,
Yeah.
I just wonder if people thought about, like, if the complaint is just so reflexive because it's just new to them, or if they sat down and thought about it, like, if they thought about it and reasoned with themselves for a second, just to be like, oh yeah, that would be no different than like they walk past drunk people coming out of a restaurant or a bar. Like the person coming out of the dispensary is not going to be drunk.
Hmm. But they have these thoughts. I mean, somebody else was saying during that, and I've actually got his comments as well, that some of these people are wackos and they might go on it sounds like he's been watching Fox News, Laura Ingraham to be specific. I'm not even joking, by the way. Laura Ingraham, if you just YouTube her, she does plenty of, first of all, smoke a joint before you do that. But second of all, yeah, she does plenty of YouTube reports, or rather Fox News reports. You can find them on YouTube with our friends from Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Last time I said that, Phil made me clarify and said with my friends from Smart Approaches to
Yeah.
Marijuana. Um, Speaking of which, Smart Approaches to Marijuana is a prohibitionist group. If you want to check out the episodes I've done with them, episode 74 is the most recent one. Um, but where was I going with that? We were talking about Reefer Madness. Yeah, there was a lot of crazy comments made. I wanted to quickly back up. I know I started with the peanut gallery comment. I forgot to mention funny thing that happened just because I was like high and it tripped me out. We got in your car, you turned your car on, and the Cole memo turned on. I was like,
Yeah.
so
I had been listening to one of your episodes.
yes, good friend. Okay, so anyways, yeah, it started off with a presentation from 1937 group. One of the things I think both of us found interesting was that this what it did. I mean, look, I can't remember exactly how it was laid out, and I'm sure if I reached out to the folks from 1937 group, they'd like send me the presentation or explain it. But they basically said like that we're partnering with somebody that has a license. It almost sounds like they were like franchising a Parkway dispensary, like for lack of better words, you know?
Well, yeah, because I think they have said they intend to open 10, like
Hmm.
which is the limit. Um, but yeah, I think that's how you would
Well,
get
and
a license, right? You have to like work, you have to partner with the person to stand it up. Like you can't just buy the license from them.
yeah, and
I
now
mean,
that
I think you could after it's up and
right.
running, you could buy them out, but
Yeah. My apologies. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
yeah,
I
but it,
just
but it was interesting. It was like they didn't actually win the license. They were like partnered with a guy.
yeah, but now that I'm thinking about it, and of course this was on when I did the Chillinois podcast, I did the Molly's joint. So it was episode 338 of the Chillinois podcast, the grand opening of Parkway Dispensary at Molly's joint. And what that actually seems to be is a similar arrangement, if I'm not mistaken, where this guy, Paul Offit, owns the place. And yeah, they kind of yeah, similar arrangement it sounds like. So, you'll see his name on it, but obviously it's like a partnership with the 1937 group. So, yeah, that I just wanted to mention that because I feel like both of us remarked how it was like, I didn't really know that that's how it worked, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I did, but it was just interesting to hear them like
Right.
lay it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
So,
yeah, like in the end, there was like they like punted the vote on approving it,
mhm.
but the next vote they're going to have is like after this deadline to rescind these licenses. So it's like I don't know. I almost feel like they didn't see. I mean, they were upset that they didn't get approved that day, but it's not like they are out this license because they can just partner with someone else if they need to eventually. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I did just notice the time. We can start to wrap up. You, yeah, mentioned that ultimately this vote did not, they didn't call it for a vote, and I think this would have been the fourth meeting they have. Was I right in doing the math? They said they had three meetings before that.
I think that might have been the third
Okay,
meeting.
so they had two meetings. Yeah. Um,
So like there would be the next one would be the fourth. Yeah.
right. And like you said, the state deadline to have secured a property was like July 11th, and their next board meeting to vote on that is not until after that. So they basically voted no unless IDFPR grants an extension, and then I guess that July vote could happen. But basically, a no vote is a no vote. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or I wonder if they like do get the approval, if they can then just like kind of sit on that site until the licenses go back out to the new round of people, and then
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know though.
That's a interesting thing. I didn't really think about that. But before we go, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at some of the notes. Um, so one other thing I just wanted.
But
Okay,
also
go ahead.
because we were talking about the vape shops,
Yeah.
like all these citizens were so upset about this dispensary, and it's like, guys, have you heard of the Farm Bill? Like these four vape shops in your town are like, I mean, I'm sure all of them are selling cannabis products.
Right. Right.
So, like, what are we even doing here?
Mm-hmm. What are we even doing here?
But I think specifically, like, the reason they have to have these meetings is because, like, isn't it something like it's like a special zoning thing?
I'm not sure.
Like, like they have like some kind of special zoning permit. I might be thinking of something wrong, but I feel like there's something with these, like the zoning for cannabis. I can't remember now. Never mind that I brought it
It's
up.
all, no, no, it's all good. I was actually just taking a look at it does say an ordinance granting a special use permit to
Yeah, special
allow.
use permit was what I was thinking of.
There you go. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that might add to the complexity of it, like you say. I think that was your point. So, I just wanted to quickly, before we go, read some of the things that were said. Um, so he asks, this was an individual that was obviously anti-cannabis. If the American Medical Association finds that it's true that, cannabis causes these mental illnesses, are you going to remain open and dispense these drugs to people who are going wacko, and maybe start committing crimes, shooting people, so on and so forth? My generation, I was born in 1950. I grew up with a whole bunch of drug users. I didn't do it. One other thing I just wanted to ask you is how much a limit can you dispense to somebody on a daily basis? Back in the 60s, I remember everybody was saying nickel bag, dime bag, pound, what's your limit? So they start answering there's two limits, blah, blah, blah. Um, they say so an in-state resident, an individual above 21 can purchase 30 grams, no more, and that is approximately, and he cuts them off. 1 second, I'm an American. I don't go by grams or all that other crap. I go by ounces and pounds. And so Ambrose, I believe, said, yeah, so that's approximately an ounce of flour. And he says, okay, so if I walk into your store, buy your gram or whatever it is, take it back out to my car, throw it in my glove box and go back in, I can buy more again, right? Ambrose says no. Earlier in the presentation that Ambrose gave, they made an illusion that, hey, it's going to look kind of like a coffee shop. So this guy asked, I also heard something about opening a coffee shop in your drug house. Everybody laughed. I wrote down, which I thought that was funny. And Ambrose kind of clarified and said, it's just the vibe that he's going for. It's not going to be a coffee shop. And he said, well, I've heard of these drug houses that are having a coffee shop in there and they allow people to smoke marijuana while they're in there. They walk out, get in their cars, and boom, accident. And this was the best one because after Ambrose made it clear no consumption is allowed on the parking lot, and he said, okay, so you don't feel like you're a pusher at all, huh? You remember that, Phil? When he says you don't
Oh
feel
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and he says, Ambrose said, well, I guess I'm a pusher for medicine. And the guy said, no, it's not medicine. With medicine, we'd have to have a prescription for it, correct? And somebody else in the crowd, I heard, yeah, I have one. Which I thought was funny. They have a medical card, which is not a prescription, it's a recommendation, but still. But the guy said, so it's dope. Call it what it is. And the mayor was cutting him off, and he said something to the effect of, she's just afraid I'm telling it like it is. It's dope. They're pushers. So these are real comments. This guy, you know, he's real. His name was Bob. Um, Yeah. So, really quick, Phil, I know you got to run. I just wanted to read the crazy lady was saying there are 21 families
The
impacted.
crazy lady.
Yeah, that's what we'll call her. She just seemed, yeah, crazy. She just kept, outbursting. They gave her one last warning. That's why I'm kind of calling her crazy. I'm not trying to diss her or anything, but they're like basically like, ma'am, if you don't stop, you're gonna get kicked out. And she's like, all right, I'm done. Um, But she was, I actually think, and this, I wanted to make sure to make this point, and I'll make it very quickly because again, I know we're closing, but it's like she was just talking about the 21 families impacted. She was talking about how, what is she gonna do if she's got to sell her house? There's an apartment complex nearby. What are they gonna do? Um, she says the crime, the home values. And what I thought was
Well,
interesting about, go ahead.
just speaking of like desirable communities and home values, like, the thing I wanted to say at that town hall was like if you deny this dispensary opening, I was like, or if you're like denying any dispensaries to open in your town, just think about the message that sends to people that use cannabis. Like going to that town, like we're looking to buy a house in this area in the next like year and a half. That did not make me want to buy a house in Evergreen Park.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, it's because we have like a business based out of a home that, someone could decide is a nuisance. It's like, man, it seems like they're really like in people's business and kind of NIMBYs, like,
Hmm.
and, you know, not in favor of cannabis. It's like, do I really want to live there? Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. We found out the city of Evergreen has a podcast. The woman was really upset about the mayor, or maybe the podcast host, apparently laughing about this issue.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so no, but to your point, yeah, I could see how you would feel that way. Um,
Well, I just think
uh,
it's something like people should think about. Like, there's a lot of people that use cannabis that like cannabis.
mhm.
Like, you see some villages like making these crazy comments about someone trying to just open a highly regulated dispensary. Like, doesn't necessarily seem like a cannabis friendly community.
Right. Right. Like they didn't seem to understand like this place literally has the cameras wired to the Illinois State Police. Like when you want to talk about security, it's more secure than any liquor store. Like,
Yeah, and
and
just the
you know,
just the inherent judgment people seem to be making like of the type of people that use cannabis was just kind of crazy.
yeah. I will just say that one of the things I found interesting about her approach is that she said to Ambrose, she's pitting us against you. We don't even know you. Your product is fine. I researched your operation in Tilton. It's fine. It's beautiful. Um, but she's saying it's like how this whole thing was presented. And I just thought that was an interesting part of her comment, whether or not it was made in good faith or not. Like when she like looked over at them and was like, I have no problem with you. I'm sure you're good business people. Like this is, and she like kind of
But at the
directed it
same
all at
time,
the
I think
mayor.
she did, but it's like at the same time, I think she did have a problem with them
Yeah, that's the thing.
and their
That's why I said I
business.
don't know. I don't know that she made those comments in good faith, but I thought it was an interesting approach. That's all I wanted to say about it, you know?
Yeah, no, it's like where I am, there's on the other side of this block is like a commercial strip. I mean, that's actually Evergreen Park, but there's businesses on both sides of the street. Like, so a dispensary could plausibly open in my backyard. Like, I'm not going to be upset about it. I wouldn't show up at a town hall crying about it and making up crazy things. Like you're a NIMBY. You're saying not in my backyard to cannabis. That's what
Right,
you're doing. It's just a business.
right.
Would you be this up in arms about any other business opening there? No.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very good point. So I just want to thank you, Phil, for inviting me to that because that was a really fun experience. And I think that's hilarious to say because I told somebody about that the other day. It's like, yeah, I just spent like 2 hours with my friend at a village board meeting. They're like, what? That's how you spend your nights? Yeah, it was fun. And it
Well,
really
I mean,
was.
it was very interesting to see just how it goes down. I don't know. Local government is interesting. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, like, I kind of dig it because, like you said, because it exists and it functions the way that it obviously does. We just saw that one instance. I've seen a few other instances. I'm not going to sit here and say that I go to board meetings all the time. Probably been to a handful, if that. But it is interesting to see those local checks and balances that they offer. And I really, really think the headline here of this story is that it really pokes a hole in the idea that the state needs to have any say in limiting the licenses at all. Look, if they want to license people for cannabis and make sure that it's tested and whatever, um, go for it. But like, let local businesses figure this stuff out because and this is my closing point. I think you've pointed out, Phil. I mean, it wasn't until just a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago or a year ago, that Naperville like was like, all right, we'll let a
Oh yeah, yeah.
dispensary come into. So it's like, and those battles are still
And I
happening.
believe it was GTI that funded that effort to get them to do that.
Funny how that looped around. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of my big takeaway from this experience. And Phil, I'm so glad you said it. I just wanted to say it again, folks. If you see something like this pop up, go to it. One of the main things people said there was like, nobody knows about this. I wanted to speak. The one thing I wanted to say was like, I'm from like 3 hours away and I knew about this. I came
Well,
to
I
your
will
fucking
say though,
board
it
meeting.
is like I didn't know about the first meeting,
Sure.
and I know there's community meetings that have happened around Chicago for aldermen who hold these similar types of things. Like, just I don't know, if you like cannabis and you want to support cannabis in Illinois, just keep your eye out for that kind of thing and show up and say a good thing about weed.
Yep. Yeah. I think, it says a lot when you, yeah, say something nice, but also just when people see you and the type of people like that smoke cannabis, it all helps. It normalizes, what is completely a normal activity already. So, all right, Phil. Well, thank you again for spending your Friday night with me to talk about all of these fun topics. Before you go, did you have anything else to add on anything else we discussed tonight?
I don't think so. I think that's about it.
All right. Well, cheers. Happy Friday night to you,
Happy
Phil. And
Friday night.
folks, I hope you found as much value in this episode and conversation as I did. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.